has some music for us. So, hi, Kristen. Thank you, Norma. As far as announcements, of course, we have monthly meeting at 10:35 following meeting for worship. All are welcome to attend. I mean, you'll want to fasten your seatbelts because Kristen has about 40 months of treasurer's reports. No, I have a number of treasurer's reports to go through since we haven't had a monthly meeting for a while. So they look pretty detailed, as Kristen always does, but I looked at the bottom line and that always looks good to me. we're quite fortunate. So, but we have some other opportunities to consider and updates and a proposal from Jonathan about a chance for us to get together even more often. Are there other announcements that need to be made?
I think Sue and Norma got the word that we're not having our women's group this month. I need to be back over in Ohio, and we didn't have anything that we desperately needed to do, so we will cancel that and meet at our usual time in September.
Well, that might be a good lead in to joys and concerns. Lynn, do you have any updates on Viv? And
She's doing well. Not she's had a few hiccups along the way, and so the recuperation hasn't been quite as easy as what the doctor sort of seemed to imply. But she is doing well. Hopefully, this week we can get her moved from the hospital to a rehab center where she can get some intensive physical therapy. She walked 3 miles a day prior to surgery, but she's been flat on her back for over a week and a half now, so she's pretty weak. But hopefully, a week or two with some intensive rehab, and then she'll be ready to go back home. Your thoughts and prayers have been much appreciated, and we still need you to continue. Thank you so much to all of you for remembering her.
Well, Decatur football starts Friday. I know nothing about football, but I always go because my grandson is in the band, and this year he'll be doing a solo, so I'm real excited.
Read in the Western Yearly Meeting update about Betty Heschelman's mother passing away.
Oh, I didn't see that.
I think the calling and funeral is tomorrow.
Yes, I am planning to go at 4 o'clock to the visitation.
Now, where is she in Mooresville or
Yes, it will be at the Carlisle Brown.
Carlisle?
Mhm.
Okay. I'll see if I can drop in.
Dan, I was just wondering, is your Nancy still improving from her fall?
You're muted.
She's having severe pain in her knees and feet, and they're talking about fusing the joint in her big toes and replacing her knees. So, all I know at this point, she's going to school. Thank goodness there's an elevator right by her room, but it's a little tough right now.
Okay.
And also, I don't know if anybody heard this or not, but Sue Bean Blossom, the Bean Blossom family used to be members at West Newton. Sue passed away
Yes.
morning before last.
Oh,
Let's hold these things in God's light and love as we center and in our hearts as we go through the week, lifting them up as we feel led and as we remember them. I'm the worship leader this morning, and so I'll speak out of the silence as led. Well, as I mentioned last time when I was reading the scripture for that morning, and I will read it again, I thought there's an awful lot here and probably another message or two in here. It's probably a year's worth on from Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. God has made everything beautiful in its time. Well, the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of, I was pretty sure my message would be on part of verse 6, a time to keep and a time to throw away, because I've been going through things a lot. A few years ago, well, it's been longer than that now, 10 years ago, at Canadian Yearly Meeting, when I was the official visitor for Friends General Conference, a fellow was speaking on the Quaker testimonies, especially simplicity, and he asked a question, what cumbers us? He said the early Friends used to talk a lot about not being cumbered by possessions, that was part of the heart of simplicity. And as I look around our house at times, I wonder how cumbered I am by things, and thinking of how much of my life has been a time to keep, and I've kept all kinds of stuff, and was married to a keeper as well. She was a keeper in a couple ways, but she also kept everything. I mean, if you saw the scrapbooks of the family dating back to the early 19th century, all the fairs that we're in and stuff like that, but it's like I'm in the, if not throwaway, as the writer of Ecclesiastes, maybe winnowing and giving away, and but doing a lot of throwing away too. And one of the things I thought, well, I'm going to start with some shelves in the basement that I haven't looked at for a while, like 15 years. Because if I haven't opened those boxes in 15 years, I probably don't need them. And there was one that was labeled Brent's sheet music. And sure enough, here was all this sheet music dating back in songbooks to the early 60s, from when I was certain I was going to be a major star. And so I brought all that up. You know, there's Gordon Lightfoot, there's Billy Joel, there's Blood, Sweat, and Tears. There's all just an eclectic, all this music sitting in there. And I thought, it's time to give this away. I'm down to one guitar. My days are probably past. This is cumbering me, and I don't want to cumber the kids with it if something happens to me. So at the bottom of the box, though, I pulled out, and there was one. I was going to hold it up, but it's holding up the computer right now, was this the Peter, Paul, and Mary songbook from 1965. It was the first songbook I bought. It cost $4.95 at Lazarus, downtown Columbus. And I was making 50 cents an hour mowing grass back then. So a fair amount. So I took a picture of it and I sent it to Noel Paul, who's a friend of mine now. And I said, look what I found down the basement. You know, I said, I'm clearing things out since Nancy's passing. And he he wrote back and he goes, Betty and I are going to be 87 this year. Well, he's still performing, and his wife's a congregational minister. And so he said, we're doing the same thing because we keep thinking our kids are not going to want to go through all this. And so I was all set to give this nice message about that line, a time to keep and a time to throw away, and what cumbers us or doesn't. But then I got a letter from another friend of mine, Paul Schmidt's his name. He was Tom Mullen's brother-in-law. Tom married Nancy and Paul married Martha. And Paul was also the chairman of the board of the Center for Congregations when I worked there. And he's a good Lutheran, but Martha grew up Quaker. She went to Westtown. And he sent me this little note yesterday that he started rereading Holy Silence. And he said as he was rereading it, he said it's one of his favorite books, that he was struck again about how much Quaker silence is more than just being quiet. It is about being still. And that in the stillness, he thinks, and he said this about Martha, he goes, I think all those hours of sitting in daily silence at Westtown Friends School morning meeting helped her learn to pay attention and to hear the voice of God in a way that many of us don't, who are of another faith tradition. And so he and I went back and forth a little bit in thinking about how important silence is and how often we skip the silence as something that's perhaps hard to sit through because our minds race or whatever. And how important it is a practice to be learned, because it is in that silence, if we pay attention in love, as a theologian I like, Belden Lane, says, that we notice that everything is imbued with the presence of God. And that silence helps us notice that everywhere we turn, that everywhere we look, even in the silence where nothing seems to be happening, there's a great deal going on. Even if it's the cat going after the bug, even if it's a child's laughter, somebody's coughing. I remember growing up in meeting, and we didn't have near enough silence in the Evangelical Friends Church. But my grandfather was a heavy smoker working on the railroad, smoked a couple packs of Camels a day. And I knew he was in meeting when I heard his cough. It was like, my family's here, Grandpa's here. I never thought of that as an act of worship when I was a kid, but I think of it now. And I think that that's one of the unique things about Quaker silence, and learning to carry it with us both in times when we're together, like this, and have this joint silence and joint communion, but also when we are going throughout the day. As I was talking with Paul yesterday, I said, I value all kinds of spiritual silences, and they each have their own gifts. But I think one of the unique aspect of Quaker silence is it isn't just about emptying ourselves, or it isn't just about not talking, or it isn't just about the absence of sound. It is also about a soulful stillness, being still in ourselves, but being still and silent so that we can hear hear that voice which comes down through eternity and still speaks today. Christ, our inner teacher, our inward teacher, as the early friend said. One of my favorite stories as a kid was the story of Samuel. You know, there aren't very many child heroes in the Bible, but Samuel always seemed to be one to me. And he keeps hearing the Lord call, and he runs to Eli and goes, he thinks it's Eli calling him, the high priest. And finally, he runs to Eli and says, after God calls the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." And Eli then perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go, lie down. And if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for thy servant hears.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now, it doesn't say that Samuel went back and right away said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." He goes and lays back down in his bed and waits, expecting. And verse 10 says, "And the Lord came and stood forth, calling as at other times, 'Samuel, Samuel.' And Samuel said, 'Speak, for thy servant hears.'" To me, this a time to speak, we're pretty good at that. People go, "Oh, you must be a Quaker because you're naturally prone to silence." I go, "No, I'm more naturally prone to talk and to think about things and want to have answers and all that sort of stuff." But this idea of a time to be silent, I miss too often. I think we all do. The time to be silent, to rest on the Sabbath, whether it's a few minutes in the middle of a workday being silent, like I was when I was out trying to get the brake fluid in the MG so I could get it out for a ride yesterday, and just laying under the car. It was quiet. Animals were around doing a little work, and I was just blessed by the silence out here. Or whether it's as we gather as a community of faith and say, with our hearts, if not our outward lips, "Speak, for we are listening. Speak, for we are listening." And whether we hear the voice as clearly as Samuel did in the scripture lesson, or more subtly, I think we do not remain unchanged for the experience. We are drawn deeper into the presence, into the great communion of saints that surrounds us at all time, both those alive and those who have gone before. The great pilgrimage that we are all on to the holy city and the face of our loving God in this life, and then in the great mystery that awaits us beyond. So let us remember not just the time to speak, but the time to be silent. The time to lay on our little beds, metaphorically or really, and say, "Speak, for thy servant heareth." Thank you, Norma. We'll now continue with more on-program worship and bid those who need to leave Godspeed. Have a good week and hope to see you soon.
You know, uh, I've spent decades worshiping with friends. uh, And, for, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years, I've had a practice of silent worship on my way to work every day. And, and I can remember being with young friends and noticing how easily it would come to them that they'd be in the middle, we'd be on a retreat and everybody would be so high seeing each other and, jabbering away. And all of a sudden they come to a place in the conversation and all of a sudden they could just have a deep silence on, which I always wished that I had that habit, that maybe that if I had grown up in a household that valued silence or worship God, that would have been handy to my spiritual growth. I don't know, but I'm just struck by how much I resist the stillness. And I feel as though I shouldn't work so hard at it, that there should be, it's like I'm stabbing at the keyhole with a pencil thinking, why isn't this working? And, and I remember that, all the slogans, let go and let God. And, thinking about how I have to let stillness creep up and capture me instead of always trying so darn hard. I always wanted to be the person who would have kind of like a mystical religious experience, and I don't think, that's really been my path. And I've come to terms with that. But sometimes I think, I don't need to know now what's going to happen in the future. I only need to know that God is here and I'm here and everything else is frou-frou. So there's probably a better religious theological term for it. I could say maybe extraneous, but and I would exclude one thing, and the fellowship. God is here, I am here, and I am in fellowship with others as we search. So thank you very much for being here.
All hearts clear?
Yeah.
If so, we'll close meeting for worship. And again, we have meeting for worship with attention to business at 10:35. All are welcome. And I hope that you'll be able to attend that as well in a spirit of worship. So, no, it's a different Zoom link. You should have gotten it. Megan asked if it's the same Zoom link. It's in the email that was sent out on Friday. So, yeah. So, hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks for your words, Brent. Very helpful.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Brent.
Yeah, thank
Beautiful
you.
message. Beautiful message.
Safe travels, Sylvia.
Yes. Have a good time in Egypt.
Our best to Dan.
Yes.